Luke Russert, How Kennedy Family Told Me Way Forward from Grief. I was a little over 2 decades away from being born on November 22nd, 1963, but I've always felt like President Kennedy was a part of my youth. His story was told through my parents. In the early 1960s, my mother, Maureen Orth, heeded JFK's call for service and joined the Peace Corps. She would go to Colombia, start schools, and change countless lives for the better. To this day, she says it was the best and most important decision for her life. My father, Tim Russert, credited JFK for stimulating his interests in politics. For working-class Irish Catholic kid from South Buffalo, Kennedy's ascension to the presidency told him that in America anything was possible. From a young age, I was told of this man by my parents. His books lined our shelves. An old campaign poster, actually from my grandpa's lawn in 1960, hung on the basement wall. I was always struck by his dapper image, the hair, the ties, the sense of coolness. He didn't look like our presidents. When I was around 9 years old, my father interviewed Russ Parrott in Dallas for Meet the Press. It was a summer weekend, and I asked if I could go. Dad kindly said yes. After the interview, Dad told me we were going to see some history and then ride some go-karts. The first part of the sentence never registered, as go-karts to a 9-year-old boy quickly occupied all aspects of the imagination. After a short car ride, I saw that image of the cool president on the poster advertising parking spaces. I was perplexed as to why that picture that I'd seen glorified on TV and in books would be in a parking lot. That said, "Luke, this is where President Kennedy was shot." We were in Dealey Plaza. We spent the next hour walking around the book depository, seeing the infamous window and gaining first-hand knowledge of that dock in American history. That visit to Dallas sparked an interest in the Kennedys that I carry until this day. I'm forever impressed by the family's dignity in the face of loss. Public loss is a difficult thing. When sudden death befalls a family, it seems like the whole world stops. You are filled with anger, sadness, disbelief. Those emotions become magnified when the public feels much the way you do. When my father passed away, one of the first people to stop by our home was Ethel Kennedy. I'll never forget seeing her walk through the door and giving me a hug. I immediately felt a sense of connection. Here was a woman who lost her husband, 2 sons, a nephew, and most famously, her brother-in-law, all before the eyes of the public. She told me to remember the happy times and be strong. It meant a lot. It inspired me and brought me a much-needed sense of relief. She was a living testament that there was a way forward. As the remembrances roll in this week, I'm reminded of just how dignified the Kennedys are, while the entire world wants a piece of their personal space. While the tributes can be sweet, even with time, those can still be painful. Young people say online slurs common but not okay. In a notable shift, young people are coming around to the idea that it's wrong to contribute to this ugly side of the internet free for all, says a new poll. Most young people say that they aren't very offended by the slurs and mean-spirited videos mocking overweight people or gays or blacks that they encounter on social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter. You can't let those things get to you, says 15-year-old Vito Kelly, an immigrant an immigrant from Argentina whose online friends tease him with jokes about Hispanics. In a notable shift, however, young people are coming around to the idea that it's wrong to contribute to this ugly side of the internet free-for-all, a poll released Wednesday shows. A bare majority, 52% of people ages 14 to 24, now says it's never okay to engage in discriminatory language, even when it's just among friends who don't really mean it. That's up from 44% in 2011. A stronger majority, near 6 in 10, say using slurs is wrong, even if you say you are just kidding. Only about half were so disapproving 2 years ago. Meanwhile, the share of young people who come across slurs online has held steady, according to the new poll from the Associated Press and ORC Center for Public Affairs Research and MTV. More than half of young users of YouTube, Facebook, and gaming communities such as Xbox Live and Steam say they sometimes are often encounter biased messages. Teens and 20-somethings say these slurs and taunting images they see online are mostly meant as jokes. The majority say that they aren't very offended when they see foul words online for women or gays, or even the N-word for African Americans. Sometimes I make a couple of jokes that might be offensive to someone and I don't even realize it, says Kelly of reading. Pa, you forget there's a person behind the computer with actual feelings. Because a friend chastised him, the high school sophomore has tried to stop labeling anything uncool, either gay or retarded. He's finding that a difficult habit to break. Young people say derogatory stuff is most often posted online or texted on cell phones to be funny or cool. Less than a third believe a major reason people use slurs is because they actually harbor hateful feelings toward the groups they are maligning. Most do see hateful thoughts as at least a minor reason, however. Some slurs are taken more seriously than others. Racial insults are not that likely to be seen as hurtful, yet a strong majority, 6 in 10, feel comments and images targeting transgender people or Muslims are. Almost slurs are taken more seriously than others. Racial insults are not that likely to be seen as hurtful, almost as likely to be viewed as mean-spirited are slurs against gays, lesbians, and bisexual people, and those aimed at people who are overweight. Maria Capricorno, who has struggled with obesity since childhood, said seeing mean images on Facebook stings, but she thinks the online world reflects the rest of U.S. society. It's still socially acceptable to comment on someone's weight and what someone is eating, said Capricorno, 18, of Norwood, Mass. We need to change that about our culture before people realize posting stuff like that online is going to be offensive to someone. Eric Fernandez of West Newark, NJ, says what people share online reflects the influence of song lyrics and music videos and movies. He doesn't approve but feels resigned to it. I try to call some of my friends out on it, but it's really to no avail, said Fernandez, 22. They brush it off and 5 minutes later someone else will come out. Why even bother? In a poll, young people say that they were less likely to ask someone to stop using hurtful language on a social networking site than face-to-face. Alexandria Washington says she's accustomed to seeing men who wouldn't say offensive things to her in person post pictures of half-naked women in sexual positions, followed by demanding commands and slurs like war and wretched. They'll post anything online, but in person it's a whole different story, said Washington 22, a graduate student in Tallahassee, Florida. There seems to be a desensitizing effect. Those who report more exposure to discriminatory images and words online are less likely to say it's wrong than those who rarely or even encounter it. Context is crucial too. Demeaned groups sometimes reclaim slurs as a way of stripping the words of their power, like the feminist bitch magazine or gay rights activists chanting, "We are here, we are weird, get used to it." Washington, who is African American, said on most days she doesn't come across racial slurs on social media, but she stumbles upon goaded words when race is in the news, such as surrounding President Barack Obama's re-election, and finds them hurtful in that serious context. Likewise, Kelly, the high school student originally from Argentina, said he could stomach almost any name calling, but gets upset when someone uses a falsehood to denigrate immigrants. Jeffrey Bacon, 23, a producer at a video game company in Chicago, said the bad stuff online, especially slurs posted anonymously, doesn't define today's young people. He said that actually are more committed to equal rights for minorities and gays than previous generations. Kids were horrible before the internet existed, Bacon said. It's just that now it's more accessible to the public eye. The APNORC Center or NTV poll was conducted on September 27th to October 7th among a random national sample of 1,297 people between the ages of 14 and 24. Results for the full sample have a margin of sampling error of plus or minus 3.7 percentage points. Funding for the study was provided by NTV as part of a Thin Line campaign to stop digital abuse. The survey was conducted by GfK using Knowledge Panel, a probability based online panel. Respondents are recruited randomly using traditional telephone and mail sampling methods. People selected who had no internet access were given it for free. Google had predicts end of censorship with the decade. Google Inc. Executive Chairman Eric Schmidt has supported a prediction censorship around the world could end in a decade, and better use of encryption will help people overcome government surveillance. In a lecture at Johns Hopkins University on Wednesday, the executive of the world's biggest web search company made a pitch for ending censorship in China and other countries with restricted freedom of speech by connecting everyone to the internet and protecting their communication from spying. First, they try to block you. Second, they try to infiltrate you. And third, you win. I really think that's how it works, because the power is shifted, he said. I believe that there's a real chance that we can eliminate censorship and the possibility of censorship in a decade. Schumett has long spoken out against limitations to the freedom of expression and restricted internet access around the world. Earlier this year, he traveled to North Korea, a country disconnected from the rest of the world, to promote the cause. It's clear that we failed, but we will try. We have not been invited back. He set up the personal trip, the timing of which was later criticized by the U.S. State Department as being not helpful because it came shortly after North Korea's launch of a long-range rocket. The goal for North Korea, Schumett said, was not democracy for now, but to merely get the people to connect with the rest of the world. My view is that if we can get some connectivity, then they'll begin to open the country. They'll begin to understand all the systems. On the home front, too, Google is now one of several tech companies embroiled in the controversy over the reach of U.S. government spying. Top-secret documents disclosed by former spy agency contractor Edward Snowden have suggested the National Security Agency has tapped Google's and others' communications links to aid in its gathering of intelligence. Schumett at the time said that the NSA's activity, if true, was outrageous and potentially illegal. Google, at which Schumett served as CEO until 2011, has faced its own criticism for intercepting data over the years. The company acknowledged in 2010 that the fleet of cars it operates to map the world's streets had mistakenly collected passwords and other personal data from home consumers' wireless networks over a 2-year period. Earlier this week, Google agreed to pay $7 million to settle a probe by 37 U.S. states that is bypassed privacy settings on the iPhone's web browser and tracked web users. The solution to government surveillance is to encrypt everyone, Schumett said on Wednesday, referring to the process of encoding data to secure it. He acknowledged that encryption can be broken and said Snowden's revelations show the NSA has indeed done, but added, with sufficiently long keys and changing the keys all the time, it turns out it's very, very difficult for the interloper of any kind to go in and do that. Google has recently increased the length and complexity of its encryption keys, Schumett said, calling it a constant game of cat and mouse between the government and internet users. It's pretty clear to me that government surveillance and the way in which governments are doing this will be here to stay in some form because it's how the citizens will express themselves, and the governments will want to know what they are doing, Schumett said. In that race, I think the censors will lose, and I think that people would be empowered. The place where 2 earthquakes hit every hour. The light bulb above our dining room table begins to swing, the windows rattle, the table shakes. Then the whole room shudders, the walls vibrating violently. A vase of flowers wobbles on the top shelf, glasses clink, there's a loud rumble and a roar. Then the bookshelf tears loose from the wall, scattering books everywhere, before we hear a shattering crash. Then comes silence, but not for long. A few seconds later the floor begins to buck, the walls bulge, the room jumps up and down and moves from side to side. Crockery starts flying through the air. I dive under the table, hold the cushion above my head, shut my eyes, and start laughing. When I open them, I see Tokyo collapse in front of my eyes. Then a buzzer sounds, and an instructor comes into the room. My disaster preparedness instructor bends down and looks at me cowering under the table. She's pleased with my performance. Well done, you survived your first earthquake, she says with a smile. Not bad for a beginner. Preparing Tokyo residents for disaster. Tokyo has a number of unusual and relatively unknown attractions. The world-only Teppan Museum and the Noodle Museum housing the world's largest collection of pot noodle cartons come to mind. But only one tourist site has been declared an official disaster zone. The Tokyo Earthquake Simulation Center is located on the 4th floor of the city's Ikebukuro Bosaiken fire station. It's open to the public and there is no charge to experience 2 minutes of terrifying tremors. Residents of Tokyo are required to attend courses to enhance their disaster preparedness awareness, says my instructor. Children and salarymen all come to learn what to do in the event of an earthquake. The computer-controlled earthquake mimics a quad measuring 6.2 on the Richter scale. There are 50,000 reported earthquakes in the world every year. Then they vary in seismic intensity. No area of the Earth is entirely free from the threat, although some areas are more active than others. Japan has had more than 60 major quakes, with the first recorded in 684. The 2011 Tohoku quake registered a 9.0 magnitude and claimed nearly 16,000 lives. The world's biggest earthquake is believed to have been the 1960 Valdivia quake in Chile, which was 9.5. The quake that hit California in 1906 and ruptured a 70-mile length of the San Andreas Fault was an 8. Other big ones have hit in Lisbon in 1755, New Madrid, Missouri in 1811, and Alaska in 1899. The Lisbon quake, which killed at least 60,000 people, was so powerful that the water in Loch Lomond in Scotland oscillated for 2 minutes. A serious earthquake with accompanying aftershocks is simulated every half hour every day, except weekends and Tuesdays at Tokyo's Life Safety Learning Center. There are similar centers in Tachikawa and Hongyo. The Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake brought about catastrophic devastation, my disaster preparedness tutor tells me. We must all learn safety measures so we know what to do in such an emergency. It might save our own life and the lives of others. Here we learn how to behave during a catastrophe, how to keep a cool head and a calm body. Our programs improve all-around earthquake skills. The center has a permanent exhibition to the 1923 Tokyo earthquakes. On September 1st, 74,000 people died in 7 seconds. 54% of the brick buildings and 10% of all reinforced concrete structures collapsed. 1% of the city's houses were destroyed and 700,000 homes were burned down. The shock started a tsunami tidal wave that reached the height of 36 feet at Atami on Sakama Bay, where it destroyed a further 150 houses and killed 60 more people. The real ones are no fun at all. Earthquake skill students are shown video highlights of the 1995 Kobe earthquake. We watch motorways buckle and skyscrapers cave in. It could be make-believe, but there are no special effects. Courses at the center include basic fire extinguisher training. There's a special room where you are given a canister and told to spray foam over anything and everything. It's very popular with the adults as well as the says my instructor, but there's a serious side. Students learn how to protect themselves and prevent fires from spreading after an earthquake. We also use the smoke mains and the tunnel to help people get used to being in smoke and learning how to get out of smoke-filled buildings in an orderly manner. We teach emergency first aid and how to rescue sedate injured people and administer cardiac massage. This is all to minimize the casualties when and if a quake strikes. We also have escape shoot drills. We have a lot of people coming back, not because they want to learn more, they just enjoy being in an artificial earthquake scenario. Would you like to enjoy another one yourself? She smiles. I can arrange it. I can cause earthquakes. So once again, I sit at the table in a mock-up of a typical small Japanese apartment, complete with kitchenette. The young woman asks me if I'm ready, then presses a button. The room begins to shake again. Following instructions, I run to the stove to turn off the gas supply and then open the door. Grabbing a cushion, I find safety under the kitchen table. The walls tremble and then the floor, the bookcase sways. Through the window, I can see video footage of falling masonry and glance dust clouds. One moment the building is there and another it's gone. The Tokyo area experiences minor tremors every day. My second one of the afternoon is over. I pass with flying colors and am equipped to deal with an earthquake if I ever find myself in one's epicenter. But it won't be so much fun, my earthquake examiner says. The real ones are no fun at all. Top Chinese court bans confessions of tens under torture. China's top court has banned the use of torture to extract confessions, the latest in a series of reforms to its criminal justice system. According to state-run news agency Xinhua, a document released by China's Supreme People's Court on Thursday stated that evidence and testimony obtained through torture and illegal methods, such as forcing the accused to suffer extreme temperatures, hunger, and fatigue, must be ruled out by judges. Xinhua said that the torture has been a practice of widespread concern and was used by some Chinese law enforcement personnel to rip up cases quickly through forced testimony or a confession. Evidence must be valued, Xinhua quoted the document as saying. The traditional concept and practice of testimony being the most paramount should be changed. More attention should be paid to examining and using material evidence. The court's document came from China announced a series reforms following a 4-day closed-door meeting in Beijing earlier this month. Last week, China said it plans to abolish the re-education through labor system, under which tens of thousands are imprisoned in China without trial. The reform plan also promised to reduce the number of crimes that carry death sentences. Capital punishment should be handed down by seasoned judges and must be ruled out if evidence is not sufficient, the court document said. Human rights groups cautioned that the announcements by the Supreme People's Court, while encouraging steps, should not pass as real reform yet. Nicholas Backlund of Human Rights Watch said that the document demonstrated that there were people inside the system pushing for progress, and that the law was significant. He said in a statement posted on the organization's website that this was the latest step China had taken in recent years to try to address the most glaring defects of China's criminal law system, and one paper document was not likely to bring about major changes. For one, it only speaks to the courts, while it's the police, a much more powerful institution than China's weak courts, that does the torturing, he said.